In today's world, we are more connected now than ever before in human history. With near infinite information and communication at our fingertips, it can sometimes mean that we are slightly more vulnerable as well. In this episode, we're going to talk about how current events like the coronavirus affect your remodel. Let's get into it right now. Welcome back, Remodelites. If you're new here, this channel is all about how you can eliminate regret in your remodeling decisions. So make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. As most of you know, I've been doing this for about 15 years, helping people plan out kitchen, bath, outdoor kitchen, and various other home renovation projects. Back in 2008, we had a bit of a recession, probably one of the largest that we've seen in a really long time. We had this huge housing bubble that crashed, and that really affected the construction industry as well, and the home remodel industry as well. Construction on a lot of different projects just stopped. I had projects that were started and they were sitting vacant for 2-3 years before construction resumed. I saw a lot of misfortune. Well, very early on, before the housing bubble really burst, I saw warning signs. For example, when the economy first started to crash, I called Kohler, a brand that we've all known for many, many years, and I requested a lead time on a particular vanity because the customer saw the Kohler vanity that she wanted. And so I called Kohler up to say, hey, how long is this vanity going to take? I got a very helpful individual from customer service on the phone, and that individual punched the numbers into the computer and said, that vanity has a 60-month lead time. And I said, okay, thank you very much. And I hung up the phone because I was used to hearing 30 days, 60 days on some products from Kohler, especially some of the nicer stuff, the stuff that has to be made to order. So I hung up the phone and I turned to the customer and I said, this vanity has a 60-month lead. Wait a minute, 60 months? That's 5 years. It doesn't take 5 years to make a vanity. So I called Kohler back, and luckily enough, I got the same customer service rep, and I said, did you say 60 months? She said, yeah, I actually thought about that after I hung up the phone because I just read to you what was on the screen. But that is a long time, so let me look into it. Well, she looked into it, she got back to me. Turns out the supplier that Kohler was using for the wood to make that vanity had gone out of business. And with no place to get the wood for that vanity, Kohler was left with a very well-designed vanity and no wood to make it with. So that vanity did end up getting discontinued, actually. So that's just one example of how the economy can affect your remodel project without you even being aware of it. There's way more to it than just funding the project. You also have to procure the goods and make sure the supplies are available. Another key factor on the world stage that is going to directly affect your remodel is going to be politics. And again, it has just as much to do with the production side as it does building codes and laws that are passed and things like that. I'm talking about way more than just California's over stringent water regulations that are drastically reducing the availability of certain shower heads, which is one example of how politics affects the remodeling industry. But in 2014, I was working for a company that made vanities called River. And that company was procuring product, again, from many different sources. One of their vanities was a vanity that was manufactured primarily in Turkey. And in 2014, in Turkey, we had a concern for ISIS. ISIS had destabilized the region in Turkey where this particular vanity was produced, and things like roadside bombs would affect trucks leaving the factory. So the vanity in question actually ended up getting discontinued. It was on back order for a very long time and eventually got discontinued because River could not fulfill the orders. So that's another example of how politics is going to affect your remodel decisions. I always encourage my customers to consider country of origin, not just for quality, but also just for complete transparency. Another great example, in June of 2019, the company Wayfair had about 10% or 500 of its employees walk out because of a sale that they made. They found out that Wayfair was selling almost 200,000 beds and furniture pieces to the camps down at the border that were housing children. When I first read that headline, I was a little confused, I'll admit. I thought, well, why wouldn't the Wayfair employees want the children at the border to have beds? And so I started digging into it and I realized, oh, wait, they're protesting that these camps should not be there in the first place. They were holding signs that say things like children don't belong in cages and stuff like that. And on that subject, I totally agree. I don't know what the solution is, but I sincerely hope we find one. That's all I have to say about that. But that is another example of how politics can affect your remodel. With that many employees walking out, it severely disrupted business for several days at least. That was the 500 employees, 10% of their company walked out. And for a company the size of Wayfair, that's a big deal. Another big event in 2019 that happened was tariffs. I received hundreds of emails from hundreds of different suppliers, from faucets to vanities and furniture to tile, stone, flooring, doors and windows. Everybody was announcing price increase due to tariffs. And that actually illuminated a lot for me because I now knew which companies were buying supplies or whole fixtures from China. As you know, in 2019, President Trump imposed several tariffs on products being imported from China, and this affected companies, major companies that you've probably already heard of. Companies like Kohler, companies like Delta, and even companies that have products that are assembled in the US. Again, we live on a world stage. We live in a world economy, and even products that are assembled here in the United States, many times the individual components, at least some or part of them, will be coming from China. Even things like screws, nuts, bolts, things like that. So I was getting emails from companies saying everything from a 2% price increase due to tariffs to 11%. And that actually opened my eyes because I now knew which companies were getting individual pieces from China, which companies were getting a lot of pieces from China. So it was actually not such a bad thing after all, because I believe in creating complete transparency with my customers. Now all this leads me to an email that I got the other day from Milgard Windows. This is the first email of its type that I have received, although I have heard rumors of trade shows being canceled due to the coronavirus and things like that. The title of the email is Coronavirus Impact on Supply Chain. I'm just going to read it for you real quick. It's a very short letter. The coronavirus outbreak has been attracting increased media attention over the past week as the disease continues to spread across different regions of the world. This attention has spawned questions and concerns about the possibility of supply disruptions for Milgard. To answer these questions and alleviate concerns, please note the following. We have reached out to all suppliers determined to be at risk of experiencing disruptions from the outbreak. There are very few of these suppliers, and all have stated there is no near-term threat of a supply interruption to Milgard. The at-risk suppliers were asked to provide a current status of available inventory, including materials that are in transit and being warehoused, to get an assessment of the days on hand. This information is currently being analyzed to determine our exposure and at what point contingency plans would need to be enacted. Contingency plans are being reviewed to assure Milgard is in the best possible position to take proactive steps to recover from any supply disruption. Our suppliers have been asked to report back to us on a weekly basis with updates on this situation. Please share this information with anyone who has supply disruption concerns, and be assured that the Milgard supply chain team is working to minimize the risk to our business customers. The long story short here is that Milgard, like many companies, is probably buying some components, maybe some materials, maybe some vinyl material or something like that from China. And what that means is if a factory experiences an outbreak and employees get sick, or God forbid, if they pass away, then Milgard needs to make sure that they are in a position to continue getting that same material from somewhere. And in that case, it sounds like they're doing as much as they can, at least, to prepare. They probably learned a lot in 2008 because, again, in 2008, a lot of suppliers closed up doors with little to no notice. So this is the first email of its kind that I've gotten. However, in talking to many, many reps, I've had many reps tell me that they were discontinuing trade shows in China. They were not going to trade shows in China, canceling trips overseas and things like that. So in short, that is how the coronavirus seems to be affecting the remodeling industry. And now the question becomes, what can you do in your remodel to put yourself in the best possible scenario in all of this? Ask the question, where is this made? And stay away from no-name brands that haven't been around very long. A lot of customers will ask me, well, hey, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? I'll pull up the spec sheet on a toilet or a faucet or anything, and I'll look at it and I'll go, well, it looks okay. It seems to be made of fairly quality materials, but I've never heard of the brand. And for somebody like me who's heard of all the brands, because I have brands reaching out to me on a daily basis, if I've never heard of it, that's kind of a big deal. What's more is if you reach out to the brand and they have a very poorly produced website or no website at all in some cases, then that is also a clear indicator to you that this is probably not a brand that's going to be around, and they're not going to be in a strong position to have parts available. If you're planning a remodel, make sure you're sticking with established brands. If you've never heard of the brand, that's okay. There are a lot of brands out there these days. But if you can't research the brand, or there's very little information on it, and they have no website or a poor website, then buyer beware on that one. Because that means probably it is an import from China brand. Which also leads me to the subject of made in China. If a product's made in China, that's not always a bad thing. Most of your major brands, Kohler, Delta, even Hansgrohe, if you look at the box, it will say made in China or made in Taiwan on a lot of the boxes. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And this tells you that these companies are usually buying from their own factory, or they have a factory that they own that they are running in China because labor is less expensive. Use that information however you want. But the fact is, you look at a company like Waterstone, and they employ American workers, and their factory is on American soil. And any part that they get, they try and buy American whenever they can. I know they have a few German parts, but Waterstone Faucets is an American brand, but it's also a very expensive brand because they employ American workers and they pay American wages. You look at a company like Kohler, they employ some Americans, and I like to pick on Kohler because they're big, but also because you've heard of them. And they do have a Chinese facility. They have facilities all over the world. So importing a product from China is not necessarily a bad thing, but there are companies out there that all they do is they're buying from the source in China that has the lowest possible price. And they're taking that and they're putting their own label on the product. And when they do that, it really sort of devalues the product. Those products are the ones I'm talking about. Those are usually the ones with the no names, or they have very suspicious sounding names. And feel free to leave a comment down below if you have a question on a particular brand, you want to know the story behind it. I know the story behind most of the brands out there because I've actually been to a lot of these factories and a lot of these facilities. If you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below. My question to you is, what brand are you considering for your remodel? Thanks for watching. I hope you got some good information out of that episode. Go ahead and click here for more videos. Go ahead and click here to subscribe. And make sure you check out the description below for relevant links to some of the products that we discussed today. And leave your comments and questions down below because I love answering them. As always, I'll see you in the next one.